Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and here we talk about the harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. And today, we're going to learn about feminism's lies from Gwen the Milkmaid. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Gwen, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content she puts out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources, and now, on to the reason we're all here. I went down quite a rabbit hole with this one. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I get anything wrong, but in brief, Gwen the Milkmaid used to be GwenGwiz, an ASMR YouTuber and OnlyFans model. She had over 500,000 subscribers to her ASMR channel and apparently made enough on OnlyFans to pay off her debt and buy a car. And then last year she rebranded to Gwen the Milkmaid, and now she swans around in pretty dresses and waxes poetic about sourdough and country living. And though there are those who think she's a grifter or just posting fetish content, the end result is that we have yet another person who happily reaped the results of feminism, only to then turn around and accuse it of lies. But Gwen will bake while she does it. We'll be skipping the Nanaimo bars, but let's see what she has to say about feminism. And if you're wondering why Lauren Graham and Alexis Bledel are in the thumbnail, well, she talks about Gilmore Girls at the end, and I have some thoughts. Gwen opens by saying she's doing a voiceover because her cat was distracting her, and so what she said didn't make any sense. Fair enough, that's one of the reasons I script. Anyway, Gwen says she believes our culture pushes a certain message that aligns with modern feminism, and she grew up watching plenty of shows and movies that pushed these ideas. I trust she'll tell us those ideas shortly, and she also witnessed women in her real life express these beliefs. She allows that others may have had a different upbringing and believe totally different things, but she thinks it's without question that our culture as a whole promotes these modern feminist ideals. Gwen tells us that believing in these things doesn't mean you're bad or that feminism in general is bad. She totally supports the concept that women should have the freedom to live as they choose, and she's grateful that she can have her own bank account and a job and everything else. So, what's the problem then? Before we get to the lies, though, we always have to be told this.
However, I do believe that modern feminism lies to women, and it brings the average woman total unhappiness. There are going to be exceptions, but as a whole, I do believe that these are lies and that we should start speaking the truth.
It seems to me that whenever someone says something about speaking truth, the truth is something they made up. But, you know, I'm an average woman. There are things I'm not happy about. Feminism is not one of them. But perhaps Gwen will shed some light and I'll find that feminism is actually the root of it all. Lie number one.
You don't need a man. Listen, ladies, I know we've been taught to be Miss Independent and you need a man, like a fish needs a bicycle, but you do need a man. And there is no shame in that. Kids need a father, a woman, you need a man to love you, to protect you, to provide for you, to bring you joy. There is nothing bad about needing other people. We were made for each other, and that is a beautiful thing. When we are able to just relax and trust our partners, we can let our true feminine energy come out, and instead of being in a constant state of fear of stress. So trust God's design because it is best.
I have so many thoughts. People really like to harp on this. Feminism says you don't need a man. That means feminists hate men. And that's just so dramatic and bad faith. It just means that you should feel complete as a person without a man. A relationship should add to your life, not be your life. And what's wrong with me providing for myself? What's wrong with not having a romantic relationship? What if I prefer friendships? What about women who aren't sexually interested in men? Why would being single make me fearful and stressed? What is this man going to be protecting me from?
Lie number two, a 9-to-5 job is better than raising your kids. Stay-at-home moms are totally shamed for choosing their kids over a career and money. People like to say that they support you living as you choose, but whenever you see someone post about how they rely on their husband financially, you are guaranteed to see a ton of comments of people saying, but what if he leaves you? Or what if he cheats on you? You need to have money of your own and be independent. So I think it's fair to say that this idea is definitely pushed in our culture. And personally, I believe that putting your kids and your family before everything else is amazing, and I really wish that I had learned that sooner.
I have so many thoughts about this too, because this is another thing people like to talk about. Feminism says it's about choice, but it hates stay-at-home mothers. I think boiling feminism down to choice is oversimplifying it, but it's also important to note that people are things. People are feminists, people are Christians, people are teachers. Just because you run into a feminist who looks down on stay-at-home parents, or a mean teacher, or a racist Christian, that doesn't mean feminism looks down on stay-at-home parents, educators are mean, or Christianity is racist. Most of the time, I would say people start out one way and then look for something to justify it. And why, yes, I am thinking of the biblical gender roles account. A 9-to-5 is not more glamorous or morally superior to a stay-at-home parent. I can vouch for that as someone with a 9-to-5. The feminist concern is the financial dependence this role creates. And the fix is for housework to be recognized as work and paid accordingly. And the current issue, in my opinion, is the romanticization of financial dependence and utter refusal to consider what would happen in the event of the unthinkable. People cheat, people leave, people die. Sticking your head in the sand won't stop that from happening, and influencers are doing their audiences a huge disservice when they just smile and say they don't believe in backups. You can let Jesus take the wheel if you want, but if you're broadcasting it to the world, expect to get some critics.
Line number 3, getting married and starting a family will make you unhappy. You really cannot deny that our culture pushes this idea, okay? Literally every movie, every show, it makes fun of marriage. It shows how miserable everyone is, the old ball and chain and everything. And while there are obviously some people who have terrible marriages, I've seen it, I know it happens, it is really possible to be happy. And I can't think of a more worthwhile goal to have, that living alongside someone you love, growing beside them, starting a family with them. It's just so beautiful, and God really knows what he's doing.
I'm going to need a citation for this one. And entertainment doesn't count. They need a plot. No one is going to watch a movie without some sort of conflict. And honestly, given Gwen's takeaways from Gilmore Girls, I don't really trust her entertainment analysis.
Line number 4, this is a big one for me. Promiscuity and dressing provocatively is empowering. I feel like this one is so obvious, but truly, I really grew up believing this. And it wasn't until I went so far down that path that I realized it was total BS. What is truly empowering is saving the most intimate parts of yourself for someone who truly loves you and wants to spend the rest of their life with you. Everything else is a total lie.
How does feminism promote promiscuity and provocative clothing? Telling women they don't have to wait until marriage isn't the same as promoting promiscuity, and telling women they don't need to dress modestly isn't the same as promoting provocative clothing. And maybe it's just me, but it sounds as though she's trying to pin her earlier decisions on feminism. But I guess this is supposed to be a redemption arc, isn't it?
Line number 5, I think we're on. Birth control is safe. If you know the risks and you decide you still want to be on it, great, it's your life. You do you, girlfriend. But doctors rarely go over those risks with you or tell you what other options you have. We're led to believe that birth control is our only option and it's this like holy grail. But there are other effective ways to prevent pregnancy, such as natural family planning and tracking your cycle, which isn't as complicated as you might think and doesn't come with all of the health risks associated with birth control pills.
She has got to be kidding. Feminists aren't responsible for what medications are approved or for how doctors interact with their patients. And I'm neither a doctor nor a pharmacist, but it's my understanding that the side effects are weighted against the risk of not taking the medication. For example, methimazole can cause, among other fun things, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, agranulocytosis, which is potentially life-threatening. However, it's rare, and when considered against my Graves' disease, the risk was deemed worth it. This anti-birth control trend is concerning, especially considering the overturn of Roe. And yes, there are options besides the pill, but I would only consider natural family planning one of them if you're okay with potentially becoming pregnant. I strongly encourage everyone to take charge of their health and not be afraid to ask questions at medical appointments. At any rate, please consult with your doctor when it comes to birth control. Don't take the word of influencers.
And the last one, abortion is no big deal. Now, a few people commented on this post saying, no one thinks that. What are you talking about? You're crazy. That's just propaganda. But that is not true because I absolutely believed that abortions were no big deal. And I'm so freaking thankful that I was never put into a position of getting pregnant before I was ready, because I probably would have gotten one. So seriously, praise God for that. It is totally a lie to tell women that their best and only option is to end the life of their beautiful, innocent, unborn child. There are plenty of other options out there, and the trauma that will follow you for the rest of your life is not worth it.
I suppose it depends on what you mean by big deal. I would consider it such because it's a medical procedure. But has Gwen ever met a feminist? She knows they have kids too, right? Feminism isn't about convincing women who don't want to have an abortion to have one because that's the best and only option. And that is one of the reasons feminists are in favor of more social programs, so people don't have to have abortions because of finances. And I know the other options are adoption, and adoption is a solution to parenting, not pregnancy. And now I'm going to get really mad and cover Gwen's face with news stories because what the hell is wrong with this person?
But no one wants wants to tell you that truth. They want to tell you that abortion is healthcare and that abortion is essential, and it is not.
Read the news, Gwen. Step outside of your tradcom bubble where everything would be fine if people just played by the rules and realized that abortion is healthcare and it is essential. Does she think giving birth doesn't require healthcare? Does she think labor isn't a medical event? What does she think midwives and OBs are for? That was the end of her lies, thank goodness. Before we move on to her interpretation of Gilmore Girls, is it just me, or are there two kinds of trad wives? The kind that want to be seen as wise, solely Bernadine, and then the kind who want to be seen as a girl who just got here yesterday, they're innocent and sweet, and they don't think, they just believe what they're told. I'm not sure which one is worse, though I'm leaning toward the latter, but now let's talk Gilmore Girls. Gilmore Girls began airing in the fall of 2000, and the premise, per Wikipedia, this show follows the lives of a 32-year-old single mother, Lorelai Gilmore, and her intellectual teenage daughter, Rory Gilmore. I was a 15-year-old high school sophomore, just like Rory, in the fall of 2000, and I was very excited for this show. Not only was Rory a brunette like me, but she was also bookish like me and not boy crazy like most teenage girls on TV at the time. I did eventually stop watching midway through season 4, but in 2014, when Gilmore Girls was added to Netflix, I began rewatching all 7 seasons once a year. All this to say, I have a long history with Gilmore Girls, and Gwen's interpretations blew my mind.
This is such a good example, the show, of the kind of life that is promoted for women these days. And I know this show is kind of old, but still it definitely proves a point. So there are literally no housewives or stay-at-home wives in the entire show. The closest you could get to one would be Dean, Rory's boyfriend, his mom. Apparently, I don't think we ever actually see her, but she was a stay-at-home wife, and apparently she's happy, but it's kind of always mocked, and like, how could she like that? And then beyond that, there's also Dean's wife, who is a stay-at-home wife as well, but she sucks at baking, and they're always fighting, and they seem really unhappy.
There are no housewives or stay-at-home wives in the show, and then she lists Dean's mother and wife. That's 2, not 0. And she says that Dean's mother was always mocked for it, when in reality it comes up once in a season 1 episode. And it ends with Rory dressing as a 1950s housewife, making Dean dinner, and concluding that it wasn't that bad. As for Dean's wife, they weren't always unhappy. They became that way when the writers needed a way to get Rory and Dean back together. And I think that's also fairly realistic for a pair of married teenagers. She also forgot Emily, mother of Lorelai, grandmother of Rory, big part of the show, and Gwen forgot she's a housewife. So there's 3 housewives in the show. For that matter, we never find out what characters like Babette do, so for all we know, she's a housewife as well. And that is apparently not enough.
So right there you can see that I definitely grew up believing that being a wife as your priority and being that before anything else would only bring you unhappiness and would only mean that you are pretty much like a slave to your husband. That's absolutely shown in the show.
I would be willing to bet most people don't think of Gilmore Girls as a show about how unhappy you'll be if you get married. Also, maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't base your life or your morals on a TV series. And it's kind of funny because I was watching the show in real time as a teenager and I still thought I had to get married. It was just what adults did. There's plenty of jokes about Lorelai being single. In fact, there's even an episode where Lorelai breaks up with Jason and a bunch of cats show up at her door, and Lorelai has a bit of a meltdown because she does want to have a long-term relationship. Gilmore Girls was very persistent in the idea that being single meant you were a loser.
They know.
Who knows?
The cats. They know that I've broken up with Jason and that I'm alone, and they've decided it's time for me to become a crazy cat lady.
I love the show, but feminist it was not. Anyway.
It's not fair. We just broke up. It just happened. I'm still young. It's still possible that I'm gonna have a successful relationship. You don't know. My eggs are still viable.
And then what is promoted as good, and I'm not saying that this isn't good, but also I think, like, personally, I believe that it isn't good, is the lifestyle of Lorelai and Rory, where they're kind of sleeping around. They have a bunch of different boyfriends and they're not really settled down. They don't know how to cook. They don't really know how to be and take care of a home. And that is promoted as something that's really good and aspirational.
Where did she get that Lorelai and Rory are sleeping around? The only people they sleep with in the series are boyfriends, not random one-night stands. Though Rory does have a brief arc where she tries to be friends with benefits with Logan before realizing she's a relationship girl and they begin to date. And a bunch of different boyfriends. Rory has 3 boyfriends throughout 7 seasons, and Lorelai has 5 if you include Christopher. And how does she figure they don't know how to take care of a home? And not being able to cook isn't promoted as a good thing. It's a joke. and a plot device as it gets Lorelai and Rory out of the house and to Luke's diner. And by the end of the series, Rory is shown cooking. Luke is also shown cooking. Why is it only notable that Lorelai doesn't cook? Anyway, Gwen says you always have to give disclaimers, and she's not judging you, but
I do think for the average woman, you are going to find so much more joy and fulfillment in taking care of your home and taking care of your family and on getting married and being with one person instead of sleeping with a bunch of different guys and kind of having that constant, like you can even see in the show, the constant, does he even like me, and just the drama of it all. You're going to find so much more joy and peace if you just settle down with one person. It has to be the right person. Okay, you need to find a good man, but it's going to bring you so much more joy. And I'm just, as an example, that show and so many other shows promote a certain lifestyle that I do not think for the average girl is going to bring them actual joy. So,
you know what actual empowerment is? The freedom to discover and pursue what brings you joy and fulfillment instead of being told what will bring you joy and fulfillment based on your sex. Honestly, I'm not sure where she got any of this from, unless she thinks that if it's on TV, it's being promoted. But these people, writers, actors, directors, producers, they're telling a story, not telling you how to live your life.
One other example from the show, I just watched this episode last night. Spoiler alert. Lane gets pregnant, and the whole joke of the episode is how she says that this baby sucks, and she's complaining about being pregnant and talking about all of the horrible things that come with pregnancy and with motherhood, and it's just this horrible, horrible thing that she has to go through. Just another example, just in this show alone, but you really see this in, I swear, like every show ever. It's a very, very common idea that motherhood and marriage is the worst thing on earth.
I find it interesting that Gwen chooses to focus on how Lane isn't happy about being pregnant and skips over Lane waiting until marriage to have sex, or that, even though she's not happy to be pregnant, abortion is never even mentioned as an option. Apparently, the only allowed response to pregnancy is joy and excitement, and if anything else is portrayed, it's an anti-children agenda. Is it just me, or are conservatives really bad at media analysis? They have one incredibly narrow definition of what is good and right, and if something doesn't fit into it, well, it's a plot to destroy what's good and right and push things that are bad and wrong. What a depressing way to look at the world. And thus ends the first Gwen the Milkmaid video on my channel. The words intellectually lazy come to mind. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.